Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of your Wednesday night shop talk show. Alongside me, oh, this side, Happy Chris.
Hey guys, you kind of got that. You kind of got that late night DJ voice going there. You accused me of that earlier, but I think you've got it nailed there, bud.
Well, Chris, when you figured out Tech Buddy, you fly, and right now you're soaring. And we had a few audio problems in the back room, but they are fixed now. So glad you guys can tune in with us tonight. We'll have some fun. We have an eviction expert in the wings with us tonight, Mr. Rob Bonin. So we'll leverage his expertise and we'll take some questions off the page. And I'll do a little bit of a preview on the Mighty Networks again. I've been doing that the last couple of shows. There's lots going on right now. I've needed to disconnect from the news outlet for a while. It was taking a lot of energy to keep up and not a good headspace. But tonight's all about landlording. Let's stick to that. We're all here, the only show dedicated to landlording in Alberta. Chris, kick it off.
You betcha. We'll do that as soon as I can find what we're supposed to be doing here. Here we go, folks. See you in a few minutes.
Let's do a little preamble here as we let people get on live. We're just a couple minutes in here, folks. We've got Rob Bonin on with us tonight from Red Deer Recoveries. Rob, how you doing?
Good. How are you guys doing tonight?
Good. Thanks. Thanks for joining us. We're going to do a little shop talking and kind of dive into the nitty gritty of being landlords here in Alberta. There's always evictions and other stories going on we can talk about to keep people on the straight and narrow. What I will do first, I am going to do, as I've been doing every beginning of each of the shop talks lately, I have been going through and showing off this new platform that we're making things happen and some changes in the backgrounds, folks. But if you haven't seen it yet, I do suggest hopping over to albertalandlordcommunity.ca and you get to see this lovely page. So this is inside our membership area, and something that we haven't shown before. We have the discovery option up here in the top left. So if you click on discovery, it's kind of a neat feature. It does a couple things. It shows you the top posts, the ones that have been most popular that we've had gone through. And folks, every time I see a really good news story that relates to real estate investing or landlording, I do throw it into our news section. So there's a lot of good content there. But what's kind of cool I wanted to show about this part is you get to see members that are near you. And really, again, we do call ourselves a community. Is I want folks and other landlords to be able to network within the community, meet other landlords that are local to them, as it is a challenging business. It's a rewarding business, but we do need to have those network and those connections to really thrive in this business. So you have an opportunity to look at different people that live close to you. So me being in Calgary, all these members are probably located here, either here in Calgary or very close by. At the same time, we can see members with a level of expertise. And when you first sign up onto Mighty Networks, you can pick your level of experience and be able to kind of learn about other landlords and members in the community that way. So there you go. Lots of good information here. And that's the tip of the week for the Mighty Networks.
Awesome. Well, yeah. Rob, I'm going to jump in here with you. You've been doing a lot of stuff. You've had a whole bunch of different hearings lately. You and I chat quite often throughout the week, probably, I don't know, 600 to 1,600 times a day.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, if you're not calling me, I'm calling you. So we keep keeping in touch with one another. Tell me a few highlights from your week, Rob. What you got going on?
Well, probably everybody here knows that when it comes to serving the documents, if you're taking someone to a hearing or a court case, can be a little challenging. I noticed one of the questions: what do you do when you track someone down or try and hunt them down? And the, uh, the administrator of the Residential Tenancy Dispute Hearing Service, Patricia, she's the director of it, and she was allowed to make a directorial decision when COVID first started, and they allow email service. So, but there are a few conditions to it. There are a few challenges to it. But recently we found that there's more and more tenancy advocacy groups popping up through the government of Alberta, through community law foundations. I don't think we need to pick on any single individuals in the group, but they're paralegals, and they're backed by Law Society, and the tenants are getting free legal services to go after landlords. The downside of it is they don't do any screening. So you could have a drug dealer, you could have somebody that was running a chop shop, and then they get free legal representation. But what's been happening lately is certain groups have been taking advantage of that and sending out emails to landlords, and some landlords don't even realize they're being served. They don't open the attachment, it goes to spam. And recently we held one of those individuals accountable in it. There's been about 6 hearings over the last 6 months, and they've finally come to fruition. And that individual is making it more and more difficult for landlords to even attend the hearings because of improper service. And recently, like I've been discussing with Chris, that individual was held accountable, and she's been told point blank now that she has to serve landlords more discriminately. She has to take the steps to serve the property rather than relying on email service. In other words, it's a win for the landlords, because sometimes you got stuff going to your spam, you don't know what it is that you've opened, and suddenly you find out there was a hearing and you weren't even permitted to attend. Now, it's not the end all do all, just to kind of summarize it and cap it. If that happens to you, reach out to one of our the specialists we have on this site, and we can have, if you weren't served correctly, we can have the matter set aside, stayed, and looked at again. And recently we had that done, and it's actually a decision we're waiting for, and I look forward to bringing that decision forward on how it was resolved, because it was not in the landlord's favor the first time, because it wasn't he wasn't even allowed to participate because he wasn't aware of it. And what happened now is we were able to bring that matter back, we were able to hear it again, and that individual that I keep referring to at the Community Law Foundation has been put on the huge defensive now, where she's actually having to follow the rules and regulations set out by the board.
So a question here, I'm just trying to catch up and learn. Does this affect how we serve tenants through email, or is this just specifically an individual that's been told to better follow the law?
It has streamlined it a lot. The Act says, and it was a decision reached by the director, Patricia, that email service is permitted on a couple of conditions. 1, there's already been correspondence. 2, it's permissible. Or 3, you've had some kind of read receipt that they've opened it, or some kind of email tracking software. This individual was just sending it, and then her evidence was she'd print out the sent screen. So that's not a read receipt, that's not tracking software, that just says she sent it. And as we've all kind of dealt with, and we've heard our landlords, our tenant has sent me an e-transfer, I go to open it and they cancel it, and then they try and say, well, here's my email transfer. But unless they have evidence that the landlord received it, that's where this is going. So it actually has streamlined it, where it's holding landlords more accountable, and it's holding tenants more accountable, and these paralegals that have been abusing it. So I mean, it's worked to our advantage, because as we always press on the ALC is diligent, be reasonable, do your paperwork all right, and you won't have any concerns.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Lewis, thanks for joining us. Just giving a little shout out there. Cool. That's interesting. Then that really gets it really clear too, Rob, on those 3 kind of conditions that you have to meet for serving digitally, or in this case specifically by email, right? So cool. That's good to know. Precedence, that means you've already been emailing already with correspondence. You've got a read receipt tracking software. What was the other item?
Sorry, yeah, you said read receipt tracking software. If there's already been correspondence, but at the end of the day, you still have to have a read receipt or tracking software to show it's been opened and it's been reviewed. So I mean, the best bet for landlords is when you're serving a tenant, I mean, if it's your last Hail Mary, your last ditch attempt, you can't find them. What I do is, if I actually serve someone today, not only did I serve them by email with tracking software, not just read receipt tracking software, I sent them a text with the picture saying, check your email. I sent them a messenger, check your email. And then all of a sudden it shows the picture of the hearing and what date it was on. So I go over and above. And I even sent one person's parent a text saying, hey, inform your child that they've been served by email and it's valid service. So when it does come to the hearing or the court case, it's over and above.
Yeah, and that's the way to do it, Rob. I really like that. That you're not leaving anything to chance. And honestly, if you unfortunately have to go down this process of doing an eviction or filing for a hearing, extra 15 or 20 minutes to get a text, a Facebook message, a WhatsApp, a text message, whatever, plus the email, just really puts the ball back in their court. And you're really showing that effort. And it's really easy to show a paper trail when you're in front of the hearing with your evidence that you submit. So. Well played. Do you want to take this question, Chris, that Michael threw up?
100%. I was just looking up Mike. I was just looking up your stuff on the page here, and I was wondering where you were, and poof, you appeared. So because Mike says,
well,
pick Rob's brain.
Mike's been a guest on our show. He came on a long time ago. I want to say it was around Christmas time or November, not November last year, but the year before. So. But what software tracking do you use for email service? What's the requirement for that, Rob? When at RTDS, do they just want to see a paper trail, or is there certain things they look in this tracking software, or what do you use?
Well, they have an affidavit of service, and when you check off the box, it says email service. I try and show more than there actually is. I see the question, what tracking software? There's dozens of tracking software out there. As long as it shows when they opened it, when they viewed it. Because at the end of the day, if they argue it, the worst thing that's going to happen is an adjournment. But if you're prepared and you could show that, hey, I served them by messenger, I served them by email, they have a copy of this, I followed up with a phone call, I contacted a family member.
Text message,
go over and above, because you could say, no, I don't want an adjournment. I want this tenant out in 4 to 5 days. An adjournment, I had an adjournment today that I requested because we weren't served correctly, and it's at the end of March. But it's for damages, so it's not a high concern, but it's not until the end of March. Well, that can happen on an eviction. So I sometimes hear my clients say, oh, well, why don't we wait till the last possible minute, the 3 days to serve them? I'm like, no, never, ever do that, because all you're doing is giving a tenant an excuse to ask for an adjournment. If you filed it today and you got a March 25th and you want to wait to see if they pay rent, we'll do it on the 2nd of March, but don't wait until March 22nd. You're just giving the arbitrator an excuse to give them an adjournment. You don't want to give any kind of excuses. It's like I tell all my clients, and Chris has heard me say this before, if you're asking for a student loan and you're 18 years old and you want $20,000, you don't ask for 20, you ask for 40 and you settle for 20. So Same thing with service. You want that minimum service requirement, go over and above.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michelle, I know he actually goes by Michelle, so apologies. I've made a note to do some research on email tracking software, and perhaps I might do a mini show or a little article to look up some technology for folks, because I don't mind doing that kind of stuff. I do enjoy it. So, All right, perfect. And Kayla, thanks for showing a little bit of love there. Appreciate it. Chris, you'd be happy to know, before I hopped on the back studio with you guys, I was talking to Kayla for a bit. So someone must have sent her a friendly reminder to reach out to me, because I had a nice phone call tonight.
That would be me.
I heard. So.
Oh, you heard already, did you?
Well, the rumors spread fast. So.
Well, these Ontario folks, they're Kayla. Those of you who don't know or new to the community, Kayla is our Ontario counterpart, and we've had some great shows with her, and she's invited us down in her world. So
nice.
It's a lot of fun. We'll be having her back onto our show eventually here, and. Actually, we have a bit of a dream to have as many landlords from different provinces all on a round table, because my goal is to let everyone see just how good we actually have it here in Alberta.
So I did actually exactly talk about that, Chris. I remember the things that you talk about, and I put that little bug in Kayla's ear, and we'll make it happen in a future show. We'll broadcast both in Ontario and here in Alberta, and perhaps in a few other provinces that we'll bring to that conversation. So it is in the works.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's kind of dig in, folks. If you got some questions, and if you're tuned in live right now, say hi. Let us know where you're watching from. I know we've got Lewis and Michelle tuned in, Kayla as well. And I do got one question queued up here. I'm just gonna zoom in so it's easy to read. So I didn't do my print screen tonight, but that's okay. So Carmen wrote, and is this readable, guys? Okay. Get rid of that. Let me do. Not really. It's kind of painful. Oh, there you go. Okay, that works. So Carmen wrote, I have a tenant that wants to sublease to another tenant for the summer of their lease, and then they will resume. I'm assuming the original tenant will come back in the fall. Besides my usual checks with a sublease, moving in and moving in, how should the contract be written? Is there anything else I should be aware of? So I've never actually done with a temporary sublease. Usually when I deal with this, they want someone to be a roommate for the same length that they're on lease for. So one, you've got to give them written permission. If that, I guess it depends what's in your lease. I guess that'd be the first step. What is actually written in your lease? If you've got a proper lease, typically it requires written permission from the landlord. So you want that in play. I'm trying to think what else is would be beneficial there. What are you thinking here, Rob, on this case? What do you do with subleasing?
Honestly, I wouldn't sublease. I would just add them to the lease. There's a lot of things going on in our world right now. I hope we do a show on it soon about Airbnbs popping up left, right, and center, where the tenant or someone will rent it and then they set it up as a Airbnb.
Airbnb arbitrage is what they call it. Yeah.
I mean, by setting up a sublease, you're only setting yourself up to open the door for something like that, and that's one of the things they do. So keep the original person on the lease, and if she wants to have a roommate move in, that's great. Add a person to the lease, but that still leaves your original leaseholder responsible for the unit. Because the last thing you'd want to do is find out that the original leaseholder is now gone, and you're dealing with your problem. So never ever do a sublease and remove the person with the idea that they may or may not come back. Leave them on the lease, see how they turn out. If it turns out they're a shitstorm or they open up an Airbnb, you're able to at least go back after that other person and say, I'm going to be holding you financially responsible for what's going on.
So yeah, you just basically you're amending the current lease by adding in a second person on lease, and then you can do the same thing.
And I go through the application process.
Yes, absolutely.
It's the act that you have to get written consent from the landlord, but it also says the landlord cannot reasonably withhold a sublease application. So if you go through the process of making an application, you check the person out and you say, no, I don't want this person, they're horrible. And they say, well, you can't do that. Well, I've got paperwork actually to say that I did the application process. I found out they weren't a good fit for my property, and I said no to it. Or if it turns out they're a great fit, fine, add the name. And let's say the worst case scenario, 4 months down the road, the tenant calls you and says, hey, the original tenant says, I'm not coming back. No problem. I'll get you signed off. And the new tenant that's been great for 4 months is going to assume the lease.
Yeah, I like that a lot, Rob. And I think the key thing that you said that I want to highlight is so important is the due diligence does not change. Do the same process you would if you're just starting a fresh lease. It's all the same bringing in a second person in halfway through that lease. They have to do the same checks and balances as you always do for any new applicant. And that's so critical. So no subleasing. You amend the current lease and you add them on, and then you take them off as needed. And as Rob says, you've got two bank accounts to go after should, unfortunately, things go sideways, which leaves you more well protected and less liabilities to deal with. So well played. I like that, Rob. Hey, we got a few more folks tuning in. Christine. Hey, Christine. Thanks for checking in. Trish, you as well. Hello. I don't know who Facebook user is. Maybe Chris can do some translation.
That was Trish, actually. She must have came in on both.
Oh, we got Trish here twice because she's the best. Okay, cool.
Good. It gets our viewing count up. Good for you, Trish.
Right, that's what we do here. Okay.
Oh yeah, I got a question from the page here, Mac. So I'm going to take this one here. So Megan McCourt, she says she's new to the community. She says we purchased our first investment property. It's a 3-bedroom townhouse located in Woodbine, Southwest Calgary. That's been newly updated. Has a small yard. One parking space and partially finished basement. It's been over 10 years since we've since they've paid rent, meaning Megan has, and she's trying to decide what to set the rent at. I've been look. She says I've looked on RentFaster and there's nothing in this area to compare it to. Any suggestions? Also, one of her questions is pet deposits. They are open to having pets, and what should they charge? Should they take a pet deposit? What should they do? Let's quickly address the pet thing because it's always a great question on here. Rob, I'm going to let you tangle with it because I know you deal with it. So, pet deposit versus pet fees versus both. What's your
Depending on the home, the location, and what kind of pet. I always ask right off the bat. I always put the word pet brackets with an S, because if you say pets, you're opening the door to multiple pets. If you say pet bracket S on your ad, it says I'm open to the idea of multiple pets with consent. If you put the original word pets and 6 months down the road they get an additional dog without telling you, they're going to come back in your hearing and say, oh, I've got the original ad. It said pets. So how can you deny me? So if you put that little S in there in brackets, it says that you're open to the idea, but you can fall back on the act that says written consent for everything. As far as, again, like I said, it's depending on the pet. It's depending on how old it is, if it's fixed, not fixed. I've had times where I've done $250 pet deposit for a dog, $150 pet deposit for a cat. I've added $25 a month rent for the cat. I've added $50 rent for the dog. It all depends on the style of the pet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, each pet is individual. And I mean, I've asked people to come right to my office and let me meet the animal. Cats are cats, but I mean, I had somebody show up and she said it was this, when I first dealt with it about 10 years ago, I didn't know what Staffordshire Terrier meant. And she showed up with this 170-pound Rottweiler that tried to chew my arm off right in front of me. And I was like, that's a big no.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt, eh? And
he's never done that though.
I've never met a dog that could give me a poker face and not hide who they are. So I mean, you get to know a dog or an animal when you get to meet them in person for sure. And so Trish, she's in the audience right now. This is her pro tip. Shared way back in the circa 2020. If you're in the city, obviously this won't work so much for rural landlords, but she asked for a recent vet bill in the last 12 months. And I think it's such a powerful check because if they can provide you that paperwork, they're the type of person spending money on their animal. They're probably also well disciplined with the animal. It's the folks that have 3 or 4 pets that can barely pay rent and barely, put food on the table, and they're coming in with a zoo. They're not paying vet bills. And those are unfortunately the pets you don't want on your property that will do the damage that will be quite stressful and costly to deal with.
And like I said before, meeting the pet is important. I mean, if it's a cat, it's a cat. But I mean, you have a dog that shows aggression right off the bat. That doesn't say a lot for their owner, because a pet does reflect their owner's behavior and temperament.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Every day of the week. I mean, I've had pets walk into my office and they're the most wonderful animal in the world. They're submissive, they're calm, they sit, they listen, they're well trained. I'm like, you know what? I'm feeling pretty open to this idea. And I do a probationary period of 90 days saying if it doesn't work out, I'm going to ask you to remove your pet, especially if it's a new pet. That's one thing I'm a little leery about is new pets. Hey, I've never had a cat. I've never had a dog. How about I use your house as an experiment?
Yeah.
So Rob,
I would agree with that.
Rob, when we talk about pet deposit versus pet fees, do you ever take both? Where you take a deposit?
I have taken both, yes.
Okay, and great with Alberta, we can do that. The pet
yes,
deposit.
You can do that. You have to call it a pet deposit, and then all you do is alter the rent. Because when you're making the rent, let's say it's a house for $1,500, and you decided to go with this little Sheltie. You know that Sheltie's going to be pooping in the yard. You know the Sheltie's going to be hard on the floors. It's a high energy dog, but it may not be a bad dog. I mean, Chris, you've seen my dog. It's a 100-pound Husky Shepherd, but he sits on a pillow and he walks around the house because we've trained him. You open that door in the backyard, however, and that guy goes he's like a Dalmatian on steroids. So, I mean, you have to think your property's getting a lot more wear and tear on it. $250 a month is only going to cover the cleanup. It's not going to cover chew marks on the fence. It's not going to cover the cleanup of the feces if you suddenly have to evict this person, and like Trish says, I love how she says, I walk with the dog and the owner. I've gone outside and seen the owners interact with their pet. And if I don't like what I see, I just say, I'm sorry, this won't work for me.
Okay, so what did you mean by you altered the rent? Explain that.
I would alter the rent. Let's say the rent was $1,500 and it was this little shelter. I would alter the rent by, depending on the temperature, I would at least alter the rent by $25.
Okay,
And say
so,
it was like
so
when I put this house on the market, it wasn't with the idea of a shelter anymore. So I want a $250 non-refundable deposit because I know I'm going to have to invest at least $250 into that yard when they move up. I'm not picking on pet owners. I love cats. I love dogs. I have both. But every spring, it's a month of cleanup. It's a month of raking. It's a month of boosting the soil. It is. And very rarely have I ever seen a tenant do that. Actually, 20 years of doing this, I've never seen a tenant do that. I've seen efforts made, but I've never seen the same effort that most responsible homeowners would do because it's their lawn.
right. So from a business perspective, this is what I've talked about on the page: is you have people come in with 2 dogs. You charge $25 a dog. It's $50,
Yep.
and you're gonna, if you do choose to take a pet deposit, then fine, and you choose to take a pet fee, a monthly fee. So it's included in your rent. That way so if your rent will go back to the, whatever you said, 1,400, now it's 1,450 because there's 2 dogs. You can get a bigger damage deposit now because you're charging 1,450.
100%.
So you have 14 and $50 a month over a year, $600 worth of an additional income. If you keep somebody for 2 years, it's $1,200 to pay for damages. It's just extra revenue, and it goes and from a whole different perspective. Let's say you have to go refinance your property and you want to go in the bank. You can show that you have income off the property of $1,450, not just $1,400. And you think, well, $50, big deal. Well, $50 over a year is $600. So it does make a difference in the end when banks start crunching numbers. So think of it with not just about the pet. What can it do for you? How does it benefit you? So that's the way I try to promote that as well. So.
And at the end of the day, this is a numbers game, right? Everything has a number of value to replace or fix or repair. So, if they want that pet in, try to put that number in that protect yourself that way. So,
and Megan, as for her second part of her question here is how to establish her rent because of her landlord. Well, you want to sit down and crunch some numbers. What do you need out of this to cover your expenses, and then go from there.
Where did she say the property was?
Southwest Calgary in Woodbine.
There's lots of comparables in Calgary. I mean, she just needs to pull up and do a little bit of research, find out what the houses are selling for. I mean, a 300. I mean, just ballparking it to start with. I looked at a 3-bedroom house for $300,000, $1,500. A $400,000 house in a good neighborhood might be closer to $2,000 a month. $500,000 house is $2,500 a month. I mean, $1 million house, you're looking at $45,000 to $5,000. And before everybody scoffs at that, I know lots of properties in Chestermere on the Lake where people have bought these $1 million mansions and they can't sell them, and they're renting them out for $5,000 a month. It is possible. I know of 4 sitting on Chestermere on the Lake that are renting between $4,500 and $5,500, and they're doing well on them, and their mortgage is around $3,500.
yeah, no, there's certainly executive rentals out there, right? I mean, that's a total demographic that you could target. Because there's people, at least I know in Calgary, we're a little bit more white collar than up in Edmonton, but folks come in and get brought in to look after a department or a part of a company, and they're not sure if they're going to commit yet. They'll rent for a year or two or till they figure out what they want to do. Yeah. So let's take a spin on this. I'm from Calgary. Chris is from small town Panoka, and Rob, you're kind of in the middle in a smaller town, Red Deer. When you do your rent comparables, like where are you actually checking? I'm just curious. Do you just do a Google search, Rob, or do you go to a certain, like, is it Kijiji, or where do you go to solidify your numbers?
Well, let's say it was Red Deer, I would pull up. I would look on Facebook. I would look for a couple of Calgary listings. Red Deer would be there's Red Deer buy and sell. There's Red Deer apartments and home rentals. There's Red Deer home rentals, and you just kind of it takes 15 minutes to do a little bit of research. I've got a 3-bedroom,
find that comparable,
and comparable, and take a look at the photographs. See, but again, like you've seen on something like Pawn Stars. Oh, I saw it on the internet for this much. Just because it's on the internet for that much doesn't mean that's what it's going for. So it's about educating yourself. If you're going to be in business, you need to educate yourself about the business. So if you're going to be in the rental business, you need to sit down for the first 6 months to a year, it's education, education, education. You've got to be prepared. This is not, hey, I'm going to buy a $300,000 house and I'm going to be a landlord and make tons of money. No, it's an investment, and it's an ongoing education as long as you do it.
Yeah, it's a game of numbers for sure. So, Chris, I'll throw that question at you. How do you price match, or how do you figure out your pricing in Ponoka?
Yeah, I just look at what's for rent. I know a lot of landlords here and see what their numbers are. Of course, it all starts off with what's my bare minimum, and then from there, I got to cover my costs, and then I go up from there just to decide. And you know what? I try to price it so that I can also get a really good tenant in. I try not to gouge. So if I got somebody really solid, then I make it worth their while.
Better to price it a little less and get a good tenant than price it a little high and you're getting fly-by-nighters.
Or turnover, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, my take here in Calgary, I do use Rent Faster. Rent Faster is by far the most popular platform for listings in Calgary. And I throw in an address, and I usually do a 2 or 3 kilometer radius to make sure I'm comparing the same number of bedrooms and baths. That's usually the big kind of key component. And also if it's a main floor versus a basement, there's definitely a difference there as well. But then the big thing that Rent Faster doesn't tell you is it doesn't tell you if utilities are included or not. And obviously that's a delta of $200, $300, $400 a month depending on the type of property. So you got to look at the actual ads, like Rob said, and make sure if it's relatively renovated the same, it looks the same kind of curb appeal. And then you factor in your utilities if it's included or not. And the ad will tell you if you look at the actual properties. But when you use the Rent Faster price tool, it just gives you an average on a graph. You have to dig into the actual ads to see if that includes the utilities or not. Because of course, $300 a month makes a big difference on a rental property.
And I'd like to add one thing too, or a couple things. Don't listen to your realtor. The realtor at the end of the day wants to sell you this house. That's his bottom line. High percentage of realtors just want to sell you that house. Do your own research. Don't listen to the realtor and say, oh, well, you can get $2,000 a month for this house. And you might find out you're in a high crime rate area. You've got a drug house down the street, as Chris has run into and I've run into before with Ponoka and Red Deer. You've got to do your research. Check with the RCMP. Look at the crime stats in the area. Heck, drive out at night. And if you're thinking about buying this $350,000 house that might be, you're like, wow, it's too good to be true. It might be too good to be true. Your neighbor might be a drug dealer. And you might be sitting on a house that as soon as you rent to someone, they want out. And and that could be why it's for sale. You have to do your own research.
Yeah, for sure.
I got another question off the page from Maria Camille. She says, our tenants, well, this one already, I just sends shivers up my back, but here we go. Our tenant has guinea pigs and feces.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, here we go. Has guinea pigs and feces are in the corner, crevices and gaps. Example, in between the baseboards and the laminate. Do we have to worry about mold or pests? Wow. You know what? I appreciate the question. That's the least of your worries, to be honest with you.
Well,
honestly, I don't rent to varmints.
You what?
I don't rent to varmints. Rabbits, guinea pigs, those flying squirrel things, whatever the heck they're called. They just get into everything. They get out of the, I never ever let them out of the cage. You ever walked into a rental, Chris, and you see chew marks on a baseboard? That's a varmint.
Yeah.
You go into a closet and you find out they got locked in a closet. They chew their way through the walls if they have to. They're varmints.
So, Maria, my advice to you on this is that one is, I hope you're taking a pet fee, because if the guinea pigs are running around and they're peeing on the floor, that smell, you can't get rid of it. You're going to be pulling up your baseboards. There's going to be damage, and you're going to be dealing with that.
Yeah.
Long term, because it goes through whatever's there and goes into the next layer.
And I noticed Kayla's saying, cat spray can be very damaged. When a varmint, like a guinea pig, pees all over, your next tenant could be a cat. And the first thing that cat does could be the best cat in the world. It goes into a defensive mechanism of territory when it smells this other urine, and it starts peeing everywhere. So you could have the best pet in the world, and it starts urinating because of the varmint that was there before and it wasn't cleaned properly.
Yeah. So the people that have rabbits, my neighbor, she rented her house out, and then it went sideways on her. So I went over there when she was trying to do fix-ups, and I looked, and the floor, it was tile floor, and it was yellow from rabbit pee and rabbit poop all over the place. Cords were chewed, rabbits chew. It's a nightmare. So, people will take those pets out of their their kennels or whatever they have them in. So really, that's a tough one for me. I don't think I would allow it, or there's going to be a serious pet charge to deal with that.
Yeah. Just continue on. Let's segue back. We kind of talked about this. So Lewis was just asking on our previous discussion around doing that, adding a person into a lease midway. Do you break the current lease and completely write a brand new lease, or do you just put it on an addendum, Rob, when you do this?
Personally, I'll take the original lease, the front page. There's always lots of space. I'll put a date right above where the new one. I'll write the person's name in. I'll initial it, and then get them to initial it, and the original person that's on the lease initial it. That's
okay.
Any purchase contract. I mean, I'm sure everybody here has purchased a house in their life. The contract 6 to 8 times before the deal is finally done. As long as everybody's initialing it, that it's effective. So you can make sure you date it. Make sure everybody, whether it be the landlord, the property manager, the existing tenant, the new tenant, everybody needs to sign it. Now, if you've got a property manager that's licensed, get them to sign it on your behalf. If you've got somebody that's not licensed, you got to be careful. If they're an employee, it might work, but if they're not an employee, having them sign it on your behalf, it can be defined as not a legal contract that's signed properly. So make sure the person initialing it is the person that can be held legally responsible for the signature.
Yeah. I would probably not think about that. Yeah, I got another question here, Chris.
Yeah. Facebook.
I do have a Facebook one. It's on my page here, so thanks. That was easy. Yeah, not too bad, Lewis. I'm just kind of thinking that through as you mentioned that, Rob. I'm like, yeah, you know, that actually makes a lot of sense. Why make it more complicated than it needs to be, right? So keep her simple. So the smoking in the property. So here's what Valerie's written. You know, looking for advice. If you suspect smoking of any type in a home, when it clearly states no smoking, no vaping of any kind, if I post a 24-hour notice of inspection, how do I prove or can tell if no physical evidence? So, you know, I can tell due to the cold temperature they're not going outside as often according to my video footage. Oh, that's random. Anyways, I also can see on the video, that the door is being open and puffs of smoke are coming out. Well, she's got video evidence now. So she must have an outside camera. Interesting.
I saw this one. I commented on it, actually. I told the landlord that, yes, you obviously have some video evidence. I don't know if that's enough in this day and age to evict somebody for it without at least giving them a heads up. I would write a notice of a warning saying, hey, I've been to the home. I've done an inspection. It's obvious that you're vaping or you're smoking in the house. It needs to be addressed immediately. You need to go outside and close the door behind you. And I really stress that part. You need to say, and close the door behind you. And I always put the words in, please be responsible. You're a smoker, you're a vapor, please go outside. Now, telltale signs that, you know, I looked into this. So I went over to a friend's house that was a vapor when I saw this. And there are telltale signs. Vaping leaves a residue on glass. So if they're going to a patio door, take your fingers, rub it, and it's an oil-based residue that's left behind. So if you've got an idea that they're going out of a certain area, take a picture of it. You have 3 fingers on the glass, take a picture of it, and start keeping a record. And then you've got to notice that you've given them a heads up. Now, if you're just evicting them for that right away, it's obvious you don't like these people very much, and there's probably more to it. But I mean, if it's just an early concern and they've been there for 4 to 6 weeks, you suspect they're vaping or smoking in the home, give them a heads up. Be reasonable. Be nice. Take the high road and make them aware that you cannot do that. And it'll carry a lot of weight. If you do have to evict them 3 months down the road, well, I sent them a letter. I took some photographs. It's still going on. I went back there. So yes, I'd like to end the lease. If you just suddenly run to the courts, run to the RTDRS 6 weeks after they move in and say, oh, I saw a video of a new tiny puff of smoke come out. I want them gone. The arbitrator's not going to do that. He's going to make a condition. He's not going to evict them, and you're going to be back there in 3 months again anyways. And now you've got a disgruntled tenant because you weren't being reasonable. It's a business. Yeah. Sometimes you got to make concessions and talk to people.
Yeah, I like what you said there, Rob. I want to highlight the point. I think it's so valuable is you're setting the expectations and you can be polite but firm. And, you know, like, listen, Mr. or Mrs. Smith, it says right here, you highlight the section or you take a print screen and say no smoking, blah, 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 blah. just want to make that clear with you. I saw that there was looks like someone was smoking on the camera. If you want to bring that up, but I mean, going back to proving smoking in a house, if it's a suited property and if you've got someone else that can give you a written statement or even an email and writing saying, yeah, I did notice there's the smell of smoke in the house, because you need to bring in some more that third party kind of validation. And if you bring someone yourself, well, I mean, it will help a bit, but it's kind of biased, right? What's the word I'm looking for, Rob? But if you have someone that, what's that?
Like you said, you got to build a case. I mean, if it was out in Pinocchio and Chris asked me to come out because he needed a second set of eyes, that's what you do. You bring a second set of eyes. And you make notes between each other. If me and Chris walked into a suite because we suspected they were smoking in the house, I'd look for an ashtray. I'd look for the cigarettes laying around, the lighters. Okay, they're obviously smokers. And it should have been on the application. Are you a smoker, non-smoker? And I always tell people, well, you can't ask me that. I'm just curious if you are. It's not going to weigh any position, because if you are a smoker, I'm going to tell you where the designated smoke areas are. I'm not going to say no to you as a tenant, but I'm going to inform you that there's no smoking in the suite and that you have to go outside and close the door. And like Chris has probably run into it lots. Somebody will say, well, I'm smoking outside. Well, yeah, but you're leaving the patio door in. The smoke all gets sucked into the house anyways. Yeah. And then there's a yellow mark above the patio door. I mean,
actually, yeah, and you just remind me too, Rob, now I kind of got the point clear in my head. So if I bring a friend in that is just someone off, like my buddy off the street, he comes in and he writes an email, says, yeah, this guy I smelled smoke too when we came on the inspection. He's my buddy, the TDO, the tenant dispute officer at RTS, is going to look at them and be like, well, you know what? I could expect there might be some fudgeability with the facts there. But if I hired you, Rob, you're in front of the court all the time. You have a reputation. You're professional. If I brought you in and I paid you to come down like $100 or $150 if you wanted to come by and do a quick inspection. I know Brad Longeway does it here up in Calgary with Servit, and I'm sure Don does the same as well up in Edmonton. You guys are third party to me. I'm paying for you to come in to provide an affidavit or truthful statement. That's going to look a lot different than me bringing my buddy off the street that RDS has never heard of or seen it before. And that's what I was trying to get at. There's
and it comes down to it. I've even
higher standards. Is that the word for it, Chris? I'm trying to figure out what I'm trying to explain it with. Yeah.
And I don't think it's not quite a murder case, the RTDRS. You don't have to prove the shadow of
true.
doubt. So I mean, if it was me and I brought an employee of mine or even my son Leo to the unit, all I would do in the hearing is I would say, I smelled smoke. I saw evidence of smoke. Here's a camera picture of the smoke. Here's the ashtray. I informed them. Here's the written letter. I asked them not to do it. I'm still getting complaints. I'm still seeing evidence. But if you need more, you say to the hearing officer, you can call this member of my staff or even my son to get credible evidence. You don't have them there with you. You get the arbitrator to call them. Because if you have them sitting there with you, sometimes a judge or an arbitrator, Chris is a former RCMP, witnesses wait outside the courtroom. So if you've got this person sitting in the arbitration as a witness, probably not the best way to get credibility.
I'm thinking more like a written email or something like that, right? Like you don't need.
At the end of the day, a written email is only a piece of paper. If the arbitrator wants to hear the facts and the other person's denying it, you're going to need a verbal witness. So it's a good idea to say, here's their phone number. Feel free to call them, their self-arbitrator, as a witness. So when they're phoning them, it gives a clear indication they're not at the hearing. They're not being coerced. They're not listening to the evidence that's been given. They're calling out.
Yeah, and I think in this example where I was bringing a third party in like yourself, Rob, or one of the other eviction experts, it's more so if the level of damage is so high, you need to get this. Yeah, like you're repainting the whole house. You're doing those ozone machines to get rid of the smell, and like it's sinking through the carpets and all that. Like you've got a full gut job kind of thing. I would be paying $150 to have one of you guys there to provide that another layer of evidence. So it's not just hearsay and me saying, yeah, it's whatever. But again, at that level of damage, there's probably more to the story anyways. So, yeah.
Let's grab another. I want to talk about this question here from Liliana Tang. She's put some names on the page asking if anybody has. So it says, so search through the group but can't find these names. However, before signing the lease to 3 gentlemen, I'd like to ask if anyone in the group has ever rented to them. It actually the conversation and the thread in it turned out to be some other issues that maybe she wasn't aware of. But when you're going to put a name into the group, by all means, put it on. Does anybody know this person? After you search, you go to the top of the page, right to our where the little magnifying glass is, and you put that person's name in and see if anything comes up. If it doesn't, by all means, you can pop somebody's name in and say, hey, anybody recognize this name? But what happened was when she put it on here, she put 3 names on, and what everybody started to discuss here was that that making sure she doesn't, when you're having roommates, is just one lease and everybody signs one lease, so they're all equally responsible. Because if somebody leaves, what are you going to do? So you have a $1,200 rent, everybody's responsible for $400 a month. Do you want to chase somebody, or for $400 when the other 2 have paid? No, you want one person responsible for sending the lease to you. I don't want an administrative nightmare headache. No. I want that coming from one person. And what happens is when you're all on the lease, they're all responsible. The battle remains between them, not with you. So the other 2 that haven't paid, they got to cough up the other $200, or, the eviction stands. All 3 go. If one doesn't pay, all 3 get evicted, right? Because they're short the rent. It's better to have them police themselves. That's in my view. And you just collect the rent and make sure they have a nice place to live in. So
I like it.
I got an interesting text here while you guys were talking. It's from my neighbor who I befriended, but they're renting, and they said, "Hey, if the hot water tank isn't filling up the bathtub for a bath, is that a valid reason to inquire with the landlord?" Absolutely. 100% it is, and I know the landlord personally, and that landlord's awesome, and we'll step right up and deal with it. But I thought it was very timely that here we're on a show and I'm getting a question about that. One thing I do is just go down and check your hot water tank, that someone hasn't played with it and got onto vacation somehow, or maybe the amount of water you're using isn't sufficient to mix with the cold to give you. So just turn it up a little bit. So otherwise, if you've tried those things, the age of the tank could be time for a new one.
I know too that they can fill quite a bit of sediment in the tanks, and that you can get like 6 inches or 8 inches of sediment to the bottom of the tank. You lose a little bit of volume, but I don't know if that'd affect a 40 or 50 gallon or whatever size they come in, right? So.
Well, those you don't know. I do a lot of my own hands-on, so these questions are kind of easy.
Really? If you've never turned into a shop talk, this is all news to me. So, Chris, tell me a bit more about this. I'm interested.
If you, Mac, I'll come down and fix your toilets for you, like I have in the past.
I don't think I don't want to fix MacKenzie's toilet.
Did I get a bottle of gin out of that, Mac, that day, or what happened?
It's in my fridge. You haven't come back to Calgary ever since. So.
All right. So. One thing that is a very simple thing that happens with a hot water tank is a filler tube. It can rot off at the top, and then it just falls in the tank. So what you're doing is filler tube pushes the cold water to the bottom, and then the bottom cold water pushes the hot water that goes out the top. So if you're filling the top of the tank, you're cooling the water off, and you run out of hot water is what happens. So if you can get in and replace those filler tubes, that could be the reason. And not you as a tenant don't have to do that, but us as a landlord, it's a very simple fix to unscrew the top, drop a new filler tube in, and you saved yourself a $1,200 call out from a plumber to put a new tank in. Right, Rob?
100%.
I want to take this question. Do you got anything right now lined up, or I got nothing to add on to that? No? Okay. This is probably the same thing as unauthorized dogs and cats, but in this case, this person's got an aquarium and a lizard. I'm just gonna, Rob, you're an esteemed guest tonight. I know you've dealt with this too many times.
I don't mind aquariums with lizards and snakes, but the feeding procedures are the problem. Let's look at a simple lizard like a bearded dragon. That seems to be a popular one. They're easy to take care of. But give you an example. I was downstairs the other day and I saw what looked like a cockroach. I freaked out, trapped it, caught it, brought it upstairs, phoned my pest control guy, and it turned out to be a feeder cricket. And if anybody here knows what a feeder cricket is, that's what you feed lizards. The problem is the damn things breed like rabbits. So, mean, we looked at this thing. It turned out it wasn't a female. We took it to Brad, but it turned out it was one of my son's friends that had this thing had, you know, basically came in the house on a bag or something like that. And I crapped my son's friend and said, "Hey man, why are you feeding this thing crickets? Feed them superworms. Superworms can't breathe. They can't get out of their cage. So as soon as you open up the door to a lizard, you have to be very specific with the tenants. You put it in writing. If you decide to allow a bearded dragon, you say, oh, you need to do your research. No crickets, nothing that flies or breeds, uncontrolled breeding, because a cleanup to have crickets removed from your home could quickly run into the thousands of dollars, or worst case scenario, it's an apartment. I've walked into apartments and it sounds like I'm in the foothills listening to a cricket chimes at 9 o'clock at night because you've got uncontrolled breeding of crickets and someone has a lizard. So it's really important, if you're going to allow anything outside a cat and a dog, do your research. What kind of varmint is this? What kind of food does it take? What kind of damages can it do? You know, exotic pets are great, but like Chris was saying, pets are a responsibility. And the last thing you want to do is have somebody that's never had a pet before in this style, and the next suddenly you're dishing out thousands of dollars to clean up your building, and it may be an ongoing thing for years to clean it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just the same thing. It's a breach of the lease. Do your follow-ups, but do your warnings, and I don't see why it's not an evictable breach if you have to go that route. So.
Hey, Rob, I came across one of your posts. Who's Shelby Krause?
Oh, okay.
Calm, Rob, calm.
This is, if anybody runs across Shelby Krause, I heard now she's in Medicine Hat, possibly Lethbridge, and even Calgary. She finally cannot find a rental in Central Alberta. Shelby Krause was an entertaining tenant. She's been banned from every management company in Central Alberta. There is not one management company from Boardwalk to Manor. I mean, I believe that young one, was that one from Boardwalk earlier? I bet you if she did a search on Boardwalk, she'd find Kayla's name in there. Or, sorry, Shelby Krause. And she will move her boyfriend in, who's been convicted of murder. She'll set up a drug house. She has multiple children, multiple pit bulls. She'll smoke inside the suite. She'll accuse landlords of being sexually inappropriate. She'll call the wife and try and stir up shit with the man. She is your worst case scenario. She will lie. And if you end up in a hearing process, she knows the hearing process. She knows there's free paralegals out there. She'll go get a free paralegal, and she will be, by the time you get her out, you're probably looking at $10,000 to $20,000 in damages, thousands of dollars in legal fees. She sets the bar real high for your worst case scenario.
Yeah, I would want to avoid that.
Well said, Rob.
I couldn't say enough. I believe her boyfriend stabbed a guy 17 times in front of the Blarney Stone at Red Deer, and Shelby was the getaway car.
Wow. Okay. Note to selves. Check in with Rob.
So all I want to say is 9 times out of 10, tenants are good. This is like the bad of the bad. I've never even dealt with a tenant like this.
And I noticed today when I saw somebody asking questions about a tenant, if it's in Red Deer, my example was, I look at someone and I want to put it out there. I don't know who this person is. Go to Google, search Shelby Krause, Red Deer. The murder will come up. There'll be all kinds of things that come up, court cases, child custody battles, and you haven't even looked on a landlord site or done a reference check. I mean, I'm pretty sure Pinoca knows who Daryl Strawberry is, right? Right, Chris?
Is he related to the raspberries?
Yeah. So I mean, I see the name Strawberry, I run.
Yeah, it's interesting family dynamics.
Exactly.
They do follow through. I got a question here. It says from Dawn Williams. She says, when a tenanted property is purchased, how long does the landlord have to complete a new lease? Is there a specific time frame? Well, simply put on that one, Dawn, is you want to try to get your you have to honor whatever's in place, of course. If you're on a lease, you honor it till the end. However, approaching the tenant with some strategic scenarios that benefit you, maybe it's a rent reduction, maybe it's a guarantee to hold the rent for another year, things like that, then present them with a new lease that benefits you and ultimately benefits them. Otherwise, you know what? They don't have to sign it. If they're on a month-to-month, you're kind of hooped. Again, you have to present them with something that benefits them and that would encourage them to sign it. That's the simplest. There is no time per se, but if you're on a term lease, then when the lease comes up for renewal, that's when you present your new one, and they either sign it or they may choose to part ways with you.
Agreed.
Go ahead with that question, Mac.
Yeah, sure. Let's wrap up this. We got a few more minutes left here. Let's help a few more landlords out. I got my Facebook view up here, and I see this question is actually from Darcy. And I also saw that Aja and Darcy said hello early in the show. Thank you. We want to say hi now as we're wrapping up the show, but definitely acknowledging that you're here. So thanks for tuning in. So Darcy wrote, got any advice about move out cleaning? I have a couple, but so Darcy, maybe you can give us some more detail. Like, are you talking about actually like the logistics of getting the cleaning done on between turnovers of leases, or is it
Tenant expectations?
Yeah, just give us context here, I guess is what I'm asking for. I know, Rob, you've given really good advice on the show before about inspections and documenting things, and perhaps you want to talk about the context of taking a picture. If you take a picture of a scratch on the wall, and I do this, take a picture, and the scratch is the full picture, and I don't know if the scratch is 2 inches or 2 feet. How do you take care of that when you put your documentation together for cases, for example?
If you've got substantial damages, just put something in perspective. I mean, glasses. You can take a set of glasses, put it against the wall, and it gives a perspective on how big it is. You put it right against the wall, you take a picture of it. You could have a framing square to show the inches on how big it is. You could take a pen, put a pen against the wall. I mean, most pens are, 5 to 6 inches long. It gives you an indication on how big it is. But like you said, if you just take a picture of a bare wall, it's pretty hard.
Yeah, cool. Love it. I mean,
that's a question about the move out cleaning. I'm going to assume a lot and say, like maybe they're asking about, what are the particulars about getting the tenant to do a move out cleaning checklist. Simplest way to do it, customize a checklist for that home. If you got 3 bedrooms, put on the checklist. Did you clean the windows? Did you clean the windowsills? Did you wipe the dust? But keep in mind, you have to make sure that the house was clean when they moved in. The last thing you want to do is tell a tenant that you want it spotless, but they didn't get it spotless. So they're going to argue right to the end.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. How can you hold them accountable if you don't set the standard for them, right? So, excuse me. Darcy said they're the ones getting evicted with the dogs, lizard, and aquarium, and smoking in the house. So they're a handful of a tenant. So if they're gonna get evicted, you are likely, and in this, I'm just reading into this. You've got damages here, so you're gonna probably have to claim for damages. At this part, I'd probably get some quotes in for cleaning. It might be a little bit more expensive depending on how much the smoking and all that stuff is and what can be cleaned. That's just something that you'll have to add to your case, your hearing, that you're claiming for damages as well, because the property, and like you said, Rob, right off the bat, you need to prove before they came in the property, this property was immaculate, like it was clean. Like, did you have it professionally cleaned? Or ideally, if that's the best case scenario, you had a cleaner come in and you have a cleaning receipt, that would be ideal. But I mean, the next best thing is probably like a really good inspection, pre-inspection.
And most times when you're taking somebody, I mean, they're getting evicted for dogs, lizards, gram smoking, cleaning is your last concern. They're not going to hear about cleaning and damages at the initial hearing. That's about an eviction. That's about getting the tenancy terminated. What you do is you ask for a 90-day clause to come back and address any damages that the security deposit doesn't. I mean, you have that written right in the application or right in the order. So I mean, you're kind of jumping the gun by asking about damages before you even get them up. You're asking
the full picture. Yeah.
I mean, how can you ask for damages until you see them get out?
So folks, this is why I think having the Robs, the Dons, and the other eviction folks that are out there, like, that was such a pro tip. I think you really ended it well, Rob, where you asked for I'm not sure, a clause in the order saying, I can come back in the next 90 days and clean up any outstanding damages should they arise. Because at this point in time, as you said, Rob, you can't get the cart before the horse. and tackle cleaning if they're not even out of the house yet, right? So
And again,
that's
even if
that's
you've
well
got a
played.
termination, be reasonable. Don't gloat about your termination. Don't giggle and laugh at the termination. I have lots of times where somebody's been terminated and they're upset because they've got a 3 to 5 day termination. The first thing I do is I remind the arbitrator, hey, if you can't find any funding, call 211, call the Braden Group. It's a last minute olive branch to prevent further damages to your home. Maybe you just want them gone, nothing personal. But if you start offering up ways that they can get funding to move on with their lives without damaging your property, offering the olive branch creates makes it so you don't have a lot of headaches down the road.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. Love it. Very cool. Trish is just commenting, but it is cleaner than when I moved in.
I say great.
Yeah. Oh,
I've
man.
heard that
Well,
story before.
Yeah. You know what? Like, just on this note of cleaning, it's always a PIA, pain in the butt. And on all of my turnovers, it's never been cleaned well enough to hand over to the next tenant. It's just I've not had that luck. Maybe it's the tenants I'm picking or whatnot. So what I do now is I do two things. I actually have it in my term lease. So the lease starts on the 1st of January. It's 12 months, whatever. Come December, not that I have my lease end in December, but just for example, I'd actually have my lease end 3 or 4 days early before the end of the month, like maybe December 27th or something like that. So because typically what it is your lease ends on the last day of the month at noon, and the next lease starts on the following day, the first of the next month at noon. So you literally have, if the tenant's not late moving out, 24 hours to turn that property over. If it's perfect, if in perfect timing, if the tenant's not late moving out.
And you know what? There are times too when, maybe something got missed. So if you open up the stove, maybe your cleaner didn't get the stove as clean or there's that white residue. I always put not quite clean and I leave it to the end. Maybe there's some ice on the driveway. Maybe there's a little bit of residue in the bathtub. I say to the tenant, well, how many hours do you think that would be cleaned up? Because right now the tenant's looking for deals. So they say, well, they always say like 20 hours. You're like, be reasonable. The stove might take an hour. The bathtub might take 30 minutes. Throw some ice melt. How would I knock 2 hours at $25 an hour off your rent next month? But I want you to send me a text telling me that you got it done and you're happy with the condition of the home. Because it's not worth the argument a year and a half down the road where they claim, like Chris said, it's cleaner than when I moved in. Well, then you can bring up the fact, well, actually, I've got this text. I credited you 2 hours at $25 an hour, so it actually was cleaner when you moved in because it was clean to your specifications.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Rob. And like with my thing where I give myself a few more days of breathing room from turnover, I've got a phenomenal cleaner that I've used now. She's very reasonable. It cost me like 170. It was under $200, and she did a 900 square foot place, and she cleaned in, and like pristine in a couple hours over an afternoon. I was like, well worth it. And it's the same thing. You just credited $50. Okay, maybe I spent a bit more, 150, but I know it's perfect. I have an invoice. Same kind of thing. You're talking about the documenting your path there, and yeah. And on that note, if you are going to do a discount to a tenant, make sure they still pay the full rent, and then you do a separate transaction to pay back that discounted. So you transfer them the $50. Don't let them lower and pay you a lower amount. Keep your books clean. Plus the banks like that if you're trying to buy more properties.
Exactly.
All right, lots of nuggets. Yeah.
Well, we've hit our hour, guys. Start losing viewers here. We did pretty good tonight. We got quite a few.
Hey, we went
people,
up now, so maybe we should just keep talking for the rest of the night. I can't do that.
It's taco night, boys, and I'm still down 6 tacos.
Yeah, right.
I'll be right over, Rob.
Who's sweet tacos?
Oh my goodness. Well, should we wrap her up? Look forward to next Wednesday.
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. Every time I have you on the show, you're always educational. I always pick up something new. So appreciate your time and wisdom.
No problem,
Chris,
my friend.
Yeah, perfect. Chris,
one of these times.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. We need to, as COVID starts to taper off this year, need to get a bit more for sure.
March 1st.
Chris, what's that?
March 1st. There's a whole bunch of restrictions being lifted.
That's right.
Good.
Chris, your voice gets better and better every time you talk on the show.
I'll have to work on my late night DJ voice.
Well, it helps when you plug in the mic that you're talking into. That now you're like just like
Are you
10
going
levels
to
better.
grind me? You're going to grind me on this? Is that what you're doing?
Probably because I need a toilet fixed, and now with that voice, you can come over at 10 o'clock at night. That's no problem.
I think what Chris needs is a couple candles in the background, turn down the light a little bit.
and you guys can turn off the podcast if you listen to this on replay. We're done for the night.
All right,
another
guys.
show in the books. That's we're well over. I should count our episodes, but we gotta be up there now. It's a good track record.
Have a great night, everybody. We'll talk to you again
Take care,
soon.
guys.
Thanks, Rob.
No problem. You guys have a good day.
And don't
Bye.
forget about Don Gray. Look him up. He's our other expert.
Oh,
Take
yeah.
care, everybody.
Don's a fountain of information as well.
Yeah.
Take care, guys.